Hey, it's Renee from the Craft Table. Welcome to week 1 of our summer hand embroidery stitch along. This week is talking about the supplies that you'll need throughout the next 12 or 13 weeks while we're stitching on our fabric panel, and to go over a few housekeeping boring details. We start doing our embroidery stitching next week. Some people like to hear a lot of chit chat while they're doing their hand embroidery, and they liked YouTube videos where people talk a lot. And I tend to talk a lot and over explain a lot of things. So I do those type of videos every week. But what I learned from feedback is some people just want to know how to do the stitch and that's it. And even those who like the chit chat sometimes will go back and just want a quick reminder of how to do a certain stitch. So each week, starting next week, I upload 2 different videos to YouTube. One is my rambling chit chat type video, and then the other one is just strict how to do the stitch, and it's super short. And so you can decide which one you want to watch moving forward. But this week, it's, we have to go over all the nitty-gritty details of how the stitch along is going to work. The quick answer is you will need fabric to embroider on, an embroidery hoop, thread, embroidery floss, pearl cotton, whatever type of thread that you like to stitch with. You will need embroidery needles and a pair of scissors to cut your thread. So that's the short answer. So going into a bit more detail about each of those items, the fabric that I will be stitching on while I demonstrate all the embroidery stitches throughout this summer stitch along is the Essex linen, where I have the floral whimsy design already printed on it. So that's what I'm going to be working on. If you're interested in working on the same fabric that I'm stitching on and/or the same threads, you can purchase all those from the craft table. And there's 3 different ways you can get the pattern. You can order a PDF, which means you'll just get an email with a link to a digital download. It will trace the design onto your fabric of choice. So that's one method. The other is I have pre-printed panels as part of a pattern, which means you'll get a printed pattern and the printed panel. Then there's a kit option where it's the fabric panel, a lining fabric, the printed pattern, the 12 balls of pearl cotton 8-weight that I'm using, a pack of needles, and an embroidery hoop. While we are still talking about the fabric, I will say that after I've gone over all the supplies, I will talk briefly on how to transfer the design onto fabric if you are not using a pre-printed panel. But also, since this fabric is white and there's a lot of open space and I'm using pretty bright colors of thread, I am opting to line my fabric while I am stitching. So if you want to do that, you can do that as well, but it's completely up to you. The design is a rectangle and will not fit inside a regular size embroidery hoop. So for that reason, it doesn't really matter what size embroidery hoop that you use. I will either go with a 8 or 9-inch hoop or a smaller, like 5 or 6-inch hoop. Those are the 2 sizes that I use mainly. And there's no right or wrong size, just, whatever. Obviously, the bigger size will allow you to work on a bigger area without having to relocate your hoop, but a smaller one will allow you to hold the fabric and the hoop a little bit easier. So while we're talking about hoops, for those of you who are super beginners, since this is week 1 and we're talking about preparing for our stitching, because next week we're going to go straight into doing our hand embroidery. When you get your hoop, like I said, I usually use a wooden hoop, and it'll have a screw on the top. So you unscrew that to separate the two rings. So you have an inner ring and an outer ring. Place the inner ring on a flat surface. Place your fabric and the lining, if you're using lining, over that inner ring. Take the outer ring, place it on top. And then depending on how much you've unscrewed it, you may need to unscrew it a little bit more. You tighten it, the fabric, by pulling it and then tightening up the screw. Now, I will say having the lining fabric, there are some advantages and disadvantages for having that extra thickness. So the disadvantage is when you're stitching, you go through two layers of fabric. You may not even notice that as being an issue, but it does help secure the fabric inside the hoop, having that extra layer. So that is kind of offsets the disadvantage of having to stitch through two layers. There are some optional supplies that you may want to consider. And while we're talking about the hoop, I'll just mention this. I have not used this myself, but some people like to have this tape that you can wrap around the hoop to make it more snug and secure. So if that's an issue with you, you might want to consider that. But the embroidery threads that I will be using are pearl cotton from Wonderfil. They're eleganza and these 5-gram balls. The needles that I like to use for the 8-weight pearl cotton are an embroidery needle from Bowen, either in a size 3 or a size 5. You will want to have a pair of scissors to cut your threads, obviously. And that's really all that you need. But like anything else, sometimes there are some notions that make our life easier when it comes to certain tasks. So the other thing that I use a lot is thread gloss. It helps with detangling your thread, but it is also really good in aiding threading the needle. This is how you would, if you're unfamiliar with thread gloss. So this is needle and thread. It's already threaded. So anyway, I'll demonstrate how I use it if I'm using the thread gloss just to tame my threads and keep them from tangling. And that's to, if you already have it threaded, you just take the needle like this, hold the thread with your thumb, and then just kind of pull the thread. And that coats it with the beeswax, which is what thread gloss is. There are other brands. If you're having trouble threading the needle, if you take just the tip of the thread into the thread cloth and just kind of go like that, it stiffens that end just enough that makes it a little bit easier to go through the eye of the needle. There are also needle threaders that you can use. If you've ever been at the craft table when I've done an open studio or a hand embroidery workshop, you've probably heard me say that I don't know how to use the needle threaders for embroidery. I do have a needle threader that I use when I'm doing English paper piecing that I do like to use a lot. And for some reason I can work that one, but these that are like this, like, there's the hummingbird, everyone's probably familiar with. And then let's see, there's this one. I have them in the shop for people when they come to sew. I just don't know how to use them. Then there's this, it's called a Loran threader. So it has, or I think that's the brand, but there's two different sides depending on the size of your needle. So that's another option. There's the kind with the little wire that you poke in the needle. And then, well, this is, I think, what that is. It's just a different brand. I recently discovered these, so I carry them in the shop. They're Bowen. But anyway, so a needle threader might be handy if you have issues threading your needle. What I find works the best for threading a needle is just really good lighting. So whether it's, during the day with natural light coming in from your window, or if you've got, really good can lights or a lamp, whatever works, I find, like I said, really good lighting is the best. And then classes, if you're like me and you need classes for stitching and all that. Lighting wise, this one I love. This is great. It is from Daylight. It's you can fold it up and I take it with me on trips sometimes. Hope my mom, sorry. So say, I hope my mom's not watching, but I think she might be watching. Anyway, when I go visit my mom, she has one of these for herself, but I like to have my own because we're usually sitting on opposite sides of the room. But anyway, it's rechargeable, which is great, so you don't have to have a long cord. So if this gives you any idea of how bright it is. And then the feature that I really like and I tend to forget about is if you lift this up, there's like a magnifying aspect feature to the light. The other thing, the other types of lamps I've used in the past are those headlamps. So like if you've seen them at the camping stores when you go hiking or whatever, they're just not the most attractive. They're like a miner's light. But anyway, so yeah, lighting is key. To me, that's the best thing that will aid in threading your needle and making sure your stitches look great, is being able to see what you're doing. So yeah, I think I went through all the supplies. So let me backtrack to getting the design onto your fabric. So if you're working with a pre-printed panel, like I am with the floral whimsy design or any other type of fabric that has the design on there, then you don't have to worry about it. You're good to go. You've got it in your hoop and you can start stitching. If you have purchased a digital download from myself or someone else, or you've got a book of embroidery patterns and you need to take the design from paper and place it onto fabric, then there are a couple of different ways that you can do that. Have something like this, no matter what type of PDF that you're working on. But this is where you take the design and you transfer it onto your fabric. And you can either use a light box, and then you would trace around it. If you don't have a light box, then taping the design and the fabric onto a window, that works like a light box. And if you're using one of those methods where you're tracing it, then you would either use a heat erasable pen, like a friction pen, which you can get, at any office supply store, or you could use a water soluble type marker. So that's one way to get the image from paper to fabric. So the other option is to print your design onto something like this. These are printable sheets made by Sulky. They have it's kind of like it says fabric like, you know. Um, so one side is what they call the fabric, and then the back is adhesive paper, like sticky paper, and you just peel it off and then stick the design onto your fabric. And that just goes right into your inkjet printer. And I like to do that if the design is pretty detailed or big or complicated, because I'm not precise when it comes to tracing, and sometimes just a little bit of a wiggle will kind of throw off your design. Here is, I haven't started stitching on it, and I'm not sure if you can tell from the lighting, but this was printed on the Sulky, and I have it onto this like gingham stripe type fabric. So the good thing about, another good thing besides not having to trace it, but another good thing about using this type of product is you can place it on fabric that maybe is super dark. That is another way to get your design onto your fabric. So I think we've just covered all the supplies that you'll need, and next week we'll start stitching. So you want to make sure that you've got your design picked out, traced onto fabric if that's something that you need to do, or you've got the pre-printed panel, then you might want to just go ahead and have it placed inside your hoop. And yeah, we'll start stitching next week. Please leave a comment or feel free to email me if there's anything that I forgot to mention, or you have a suggestion that I haven't thought of, or if you have a question and you want me to answer that, please let me know, because if you have a question, likely someone else does as well. Also, I love the community aspect of doing a stitch along. Even though we're virtual and we're in different places, there is a type of connection knowing that there are other people doing the same project that you're doing at the same time. So any kind of interaction that we can have is great. I know there's not one social media platform that everyone uses. I've tried that. Not everyone is on Facebook, not everyone is on Instagram. We did Podia one year because it has a community site, but not everyone is on Podia. And I know not everyone is on YouTube that often, but you're on here now watching this video. So I discovered recently that there is a community tab on my YouTube channel page. I say all that to say I don't really know a ton about how the community tab works, but let's give it a try since we're already on YouTube anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a simple post about maybe like an introduction post where everyone, or not everyone, but if you would like, you could go on and introduce yourself, maybe say where you're from, and we can just get the conversation going, because I do get emails from you guys and direct messages on Instagram, and they're always so nice and positive and enthusiastic about the stitch along, which I love. Thank you so much. Keep doing that. So let's try and give that community aspect a go on YouTube. And if you are on YouTube a lot and you've done that with other channels, please let me know how that works out. Any suggestions you might have so that we can do that as well. See, I told you, I tend to ramble and talk a lot. So I'm going to wrap this up by saying thanks again for participating in the Summer Embroidery Stitch Along. I'm looking forward to when we get to actually doing our embroidery stitching. That's the part that's really, really fun. And until then, happy stitching, and I will see you next week.